Hi everyone, back again. Happy to welcome my fellow panelists. Let's welcome Ate, Mustafa, Bastian and Iver on the stage. So guys, first of all, I'm curious and the others are curious as well to get a few words what you are doing. So please Ate, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And hey everyone, so I'm at the VP for Data Analytics at NGP Capital, so leading our small data team of two folks. And basically what we are focused in is more the kind of the early pipeline side of things. So the mandate is the whole, let's say, the life cycle of investment from the beginning to the actually exit, but we are mostly focused on the sourcing, screening, evaluation side of companies. And bit about myself, a data engineer, data scientist by background, and NGP Capital, so we are a global Series A, Series B stage investor, sector focused to things like cybersecurity, industrial technology, edge data infrastructure, that kind of stuff. And yeah, so global investor Series A and B, like I guess I said already, but anyway, so backed by Nokia, been around 20 years, and I've been with NGP 5 years building the data product.
Great.
Thanks, Mustafa from Netherlands InvestNL. So I am the senior data scientist of a team of 4 people. And InvestNL is state-owned impact investor of the Netherlands. So we are investing in energy transition and circularity in the areas of agribusiness, biocircular, energy, life science and health, and deep tech, pretty much many actually. But our mandate is to contribute to the carbon neutral economy of Netherlands by 2050.
Hi, my name is Bastian. I'm the founder and CEO of Blackwood Ventures, an emerging manager based out of Copenhagen. We invest in pre-seed and seed stage startups all throughout Europe, primarily in fintech, Web3 and clean tech. So I guess I'm going to take the GP sort of perspective from up here, from an emerging manager perspective that's very focused on how we can implement more AI and data into our program while doing it with limited resources. Prior to this, I worked at BlackRock for a number of years in London, Geneva, and lastly New York, leading product strategy for their M&A hedge fund and growing it to $10 billion. So it's interesting being in the VC world, raising a smaller fund. It's a different beast, but definitely I've taken some key insights from BlackRock and tried to see how we can use that in early stage VC.
Hello from my side. My name is Eva. Today I'm here representing Elevator Ventures. It's a fund out of Vienna, based out of Vienna, and we invest in Series A, mostly Series A stage companies across Europe. Mostly focus obviously on fintech because the fund is backed by one of the biggest banks in a CE, which is Raiffeisen Bank International. We also have a beyond banking mandate, which is a part of the fund that invests actually across agriculture, prop tech, mobility, and other sectors as well. So happy to be here.
Great, thank you all. Today we've learned a lot on how to leverage data in due diligence, on how to leverage data in reporting and stuff like this. Now we're talking a bit about more on how to use data in the sourcing part. And there are actually a bunch of tools out on the market. You can build stuff on your own. So what tools are you specifically using? And in which way do these tools improve your ability to really source teams?
Yeah, so for us, so actually what we've done is we built a kind of an internal data platform, sourcing platform, AI platform, whatever you might call it. We call it with the name Q. So that's kind of something that we regard as, in a sense, like an operating system for the firm. So, but of course, it's not like we build everything from the beginning. So far from that. So in the build versus buy discussion, I would say we are more on the buy side. So in general, it's it's cheaper and easier to buy than build internally if you can. So the building is something that you should really focus on. What really you believe can kind of can give you the alpha. And what queue is, what goes to queue. So of course there's a lot of license data, web data, and also first-party data. And on top of that, we have, in a sense, like a layer of algorithms, all that, and something that we've been constructing now. Let's say the last 2 years since in a sense, the beginning of the kind of the LLM era has been more like focus on search, so being able to find companies based on kind of semantic meaning, natural language, so be able to find similar companies and so on. I guess the second part, how that has impacted. So I guess it's in a sense keeping it on the logical level. So I think there's few kind of paradigm changes that we've seen. So I guess first is the shift from inbound to outbound. So that's maybe an idea that we started with, and I think we are seeing a lot of progress there. So I think a large majority of deals we have are now outbound and based on data. Second, so it's this kind of reactive preemptive type of change. So basically from being kind of inbound driven, acting on the information that gets to you, we can be more of a, let's say, a preemptive, proactive kind of build our conviction of something and then act based on that. And just to raise final dimension there. So one is the kind of the individual bias versus objectivity. So of course it's not like you implement some piece of machine learning or AI and suddenly you're kind of objective. But I think venture as a business, especially the kind of the traditional model, is a lot about rules of thumb. So at least kind of machine learning AI as a tool is for us at least some kind of a way to, let's say sanity check and hopefully decrease the impact of that kind of rules of thumb that originate often from let's say experience of a sample of one and seem to be quite common in the world of venture.
Great. Mustafa, what's your approach?
Data tools for deal sourcing. Well, there are many, of course, but maybe before that I have to emphasize that we are a bit kind of a different organization than a regular VC. We are state-owned and impact investors. So, for example, we are not looking for necessarily next unicorn, but being additional to the market to be able to make the impact. So in that regard, we are more looking for risky deals, risk areas that we can address the market failures. Having that said, yes, we are using in-house tools, but also buying. For example, what we do, we heavily employ LLMs for entity matching and AI tagging. Because, well, we are also buying data from data vendors for sure, because we can't build another deal room for sure. But what we do, since their industry tagging or categorization will never ever align with our very specific focus areas, we have to map those companies and entities into our focus areas. For that reason, we are using LLMs, basically OpenAI and Llama, and comparing these two, by the way, right away, to be able to have the basis on top of which we can create deal sourcing, and more importantly, actually for our case, understanding the funding gaps, market failures, for where to look at to be additional.
Great. Bastian, as an emerging fund manager, what did you implement on the tool stack? Is there anything you're specifically using, and like which kind of data? Is it LinkedIn you're looking in, some other factors?
Yeah, so a bunch of things. I mean, I started the company 3 years ago. The first year was just research. The second year was getting a financial accreditation, and the last year has been fundraising and deploying. So we had 2 years sort of just to think about things, and I think for us it's okay, AI is out there, we need to use it. Is there anything we can build semi-in-house? I have to say today we use probably, I don't even know, probably 25 to 30 different softwares that we're paying monthly subscriptions to. So I'm the best friend of service providers wherever I go, but we definitely from day one we built different tools ourselves. it was more focused actually on the due diligence more than the sourcing originally. And I think one thing I can maybe mention as an example is that we built our own LLP, and that was inspired by people, what they did at BlackRock. So, you know, for public companies, there's 4,000 public companies in the US that come out with quarterly reports every quarter. And back in the day, Warren Buffett would sit with his team and they would read these by hand, right? And that's not how it works today. So they would read these quarterly reports and they looked at different things. And the two main components that they found was sentiment and subjectivity scores was very important. And they found that they should listen to the CFO and not the CEO. The CEO is a salesperson, the CFO is looking at objective data. And so we thought, okay, how can we use that on startups? And so whenever we went a little bit later in the DD process, we asked them, you know, our standard due diligence questionnaire questions, and usually when they filled that out, it'd be a pretty long document that our team would then have to look at, which we did. But we could also click a button and it would give us these scores. So sentiment is whether they're optimistic or pessimistic in their wording, and subjectivity is whether they know what they're talking about. And it's based on data and numbers, or whether they think and believe. And so I think that was hugely important. We had thousands of startups through that, and that's something that we can then leverage now to try and build upon that. It was also sort of a personality test, which I'm sure you would all agree on. You know, the PhD type founders, they were very objective, but very pessimistic, and the business type founders was the opposite. So we got a little bit of, I think, proprietary insight, and I think it all relates back to, you know, what question are we trying to solve? Why are we using AI in the first place? What are we really looking for? Is it a marketing stunt, or if it's not, then what advantage can we truly gain? And I think it's more about the creative side of thinking about these problems rather than just the tech.
Eva, investing Series A upwards at Elevator Ventures, is there any specific platform you're looking at, any specific go-to?
Yes, so very, very interesting what you have just said. So as you probably know, Elevator Ventures started off as a, as a lab, as an accelerator, and back then everything in 2017, everything was done manually. Now, with the second fund, we obviously apply a little bit more of a data approach to sourcing, not only sourcing but also pipeline management. So we are aware of all the tools that are out there, and also today we heard there are more than 600 vendors, right? But what we found really useful, so far, is actually Microsoft Dynamics. It's obviously all these Microsoft tools that help us really streamline the whole process, and we use also Power BI for pipeline management. So obviously this helps us really a lot in a daily process, and of course there's certain tools that we also use to measure ECG of impact of our own portfolio companies. In addition to that, we are also doing actually testing currently Microsoft Copilot that will also help us enhance the decision-making process. So that's really it in a nutshell. I mean, what I also want to say that being a Series A stage fund, really mostly focused on Central Europe, we have not really built anything in-house or anything revolutionary. We do use all the data available out there and try really to streamline the process and make it more structured for us in order to be able to make a better decisions, hopefully.
I'm curious, please add on this, how much the human part and human judgment then also is implemented within the process, and how this differs maybe from you to Bastian, to Mustafa, or to Ate.
Yes, I can take over this now. I think it really matters. So we really try to automate, everything what is possible. All the repetitive kind of parts of the process. But on the other side, it really the human judgment, the human expertise is really essential, especially when it comes to Series A-stage companies where we need not only someone who will look at the certain things from the investment point of view, but also industry experts. And this is where we also rely on the bank, which is obviously behind the fund, that helps us also a lot with the industry expertise and many other things, testing the product, opening up network to various stakeholders and so on. So we are certainly very interested in making the whole process as efficient as possible. But on the other side, for us, the human judgment is essential too. So.
Yeah, I would agree, and I have a lot of things to say about this, but I'll try to keep it brief. I mean, first and foremost, again, coming back to what I said earlier, I think it's about what is important. Why do we use AI? And I think there's first of all distinction between automation and proper AI, which in my view in this world is about gathering data, learning upon it, and making the models better. And I think even for the people up here that have spent 5 years doing a lot of great work, it'll take 8 to 10, 12 years before we really know what is really the secret sauce that is working. And I think that's the challenging issue. And so going back to the original question is, why are we doing this? Why are we implementing tech? Why is Atomico hiring 8 people full-time to work on this? It's hopefully to get better returns. And so we try to work with, again, as you mentioned, sort of experts in the field to try and understand where this is heading in general. So last year we got the opportunity to interview Sam Altman when he was in London, obviously very pro-AI. We're launching a podcast with the co-founder of Skype, who's very anti-AI. So we're just trying to get all the views connected. And we're working with leading research institutions to try and figure out how we can minimize cognitive biases and things like that, and then how does that translate into what we put into the models that we're going to use ultimately. So I think it's a very complicated question, and we do all this in the end, and all this is being done by humans, right? So the machines are there to help us, but ultimately all the creative thoughts, all the academic research, all the views about the future ultimately are done by humans. So I think humans are still way beyond 50% of the equation, and it's going to take a while before we know the impact of AI and VC.
Mustafa, how do you ensure that this data is also reliable then? Maybe you can add this into your answer.
Yeah, with humans actually. Well, human component will always be there. I strongly believe. I think many of us already align with the fact that there is not about the quant VC, but kind of an augmented VC we are talking about. So the all things that we have been discussing today is just for one thing, to my understanding, is better decision making. At the end, for better returns, of course. So better decision making, plus maybe also efficient processes, which also leads better decision making. So then the decision maker will be if not always, for a long time, humans in this space. So it's very important to include them. And what we do, for example, to tagging entities, I need humans to understand what their understanding of deep tech or precision agriculture or whatever. So, and then we do this in sprints so we make a model employing LLMs and show the results to humans, and they put input for now it is manually, but it's gonna be hopefully automated as well. And at the end, they are the decision makers for any process steps there. And the accuracy of data, well, when we are talking about data, we have, in general, to my understanding, for our case, two big problems. One is accuracy, the second is taxonomy. Taxonomy I already mentioned about. The accuracy for solving that part, of course, depends on what data we are talking about, but for this case, it is kind of financial data, people data. So we are combining different data sources, basically. So getting data from X vendor to Y vendor and combine them. So it's a really hard job, the application, so sentiment analysis as well involved. And also if there is no data, just try to go and find out a human component there to fill the data in, or scrap data from somewhere else if you are lucky enough. So, well, combining different data sources to make it accurate and reliable, and employ people to to understand how reliable it is actually.
Ate, you as a data engineer, do you also measure like the efficiency of the AI and the data-driven approach you are doing? What's your point of view, or like what information aspect, etc., can you give the investors working with the tech stack?
Yeah, so if I understood correctly, you're asking like how do we measure that this is yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's a few ways of doing it, but I think what we have in a sense found important is that there is some set of KPIs basically that we are after with the data project. So I mean it's of course, I mean, like I think Keshvi mentioned in her talk that it's like a lot of data projects start with others doing something like that, and maybe we need a data scientist and we need to start doing some of this amazing data stuff. But it at least for me, it's more of like a pick your battles type of thing. So basically figure out exactly the stages of the project process, the use cases where you want to use data, and in those cases measure the impact of what you are doing with data. So of course, I mean, there's always the question like, I mean, these are not things that happen in a flux. So the question is always like, okay, so what would have been doing if we hadn't been doing this? So it might be sometimes hard to figure out the baseline. But there are things that you can do. So for example, you can track different metrics, and they don't necessarily need to be something amazing. So it's like, I mean, shares of companies discovered from data, shares of deals that we should have seen, but we didn't see, stuff like that. And also we done a few like more of a, let's say, top-down type of analysis. So I mean, for example, on the decision making and how the data has impacted that. So figure out the hypothesis and test it and see what comes out. So that's maybe the last thing we've been doing.
Great. So guys, what about you? Pull out your phone and ask these experts some sort of question. Who wants to take this?
We don't have exit, so yet. Pass.
Anything else? Interested on this topic? Then let me take another question from here. How much do you rely on historical data, depending the sourcing part, or how much of the sourcing is just data you just encountered yet, just searching, scraping, stuff like this, or does historical data influence the way you are sourcing your deals?
Yeah, maybe I can start on this. So I think I mean kind of similar to what Harry said earlier. So there's in a sense like two parts in the stack, or let's say two pieces of two kinds of machine learning we are doing. So there's the more traditional type of machine learning where you go and you train your models with a training data set. For example, like we do things like I mean try to predict the company fit for our thesis, or let's say try to predict the momentum of the company. So that's the kind of the one side. And I think on that side, especially the focus, I mean the training data, of course, I mean it's training data, so it needs to come from somewhere, and somewhere is always history. So that's kind of a key problem that you need to solve. Like, what's the? I mean, I'm always, for example, I've been skeptical of like trying to model exits, or trying to figure out what could be the exit, because the the cycle or the time difference between the investment and the exit is going to be long. So how do you ensure, for example, that the underlying phenomena hasn't changed quite a lot in the meantime while you try to kind of implement that? So rather try to predict something that's closer in the future, like the timing of the next round, or something that would be within let's say within a year or 2 years of time, which kind of window for the training data you need. But then there's the other part of the stack, the more the search-oriented, LLM-oriented stack. So that's something that where we can use a lot more kind of I mean basically like scrape company web pages at the moment we need them with some kind of agentic setup and process that data immediately at the moment. So I think that's kind of less leaning on the let's say the historic side of things and more kind of a real-time operation. But of course, I mean these two different sides of the stack have very different use cases as well. So it again it depends.
Great. Maybe let's, or Mustafa, do you want to add something on this?
Well, historical data is important, of course, and not only for deal sourcing, but also scenario stress testing, for example, creating scenarios for your portfolio management and optimization. So we employ heavily historical data.
Great. Bastian, maybe you can take on the first one regarding if your or those investment theses directly affect the outcome and the alpha.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's our hypothesis. We'll need to see if it works out. But essentially, the main essence of it and is, I think humans are quite bad at when they read answers to really, they might have a hunch, and when they talk to founders, and we use this as well in scripts. So all the calls we have with founders are recorded. It's been transcribed by AI, and then that's giving us some summaries, and just having that transcript and being able to run our NLP on that is useful, because I think oftentimes we're more in our own heads than in the founders' heads, and so being able to have some actual, data and scores on how optimistic they are, how subjective they are, is something that we are willing to bet on will help us make better investments. The more objective they are, the more optimistic they are in general. I would say that's a positive thing that we can hold on to and sort of bet on that. Of course, that varies within sectors as well. So what we do is we compare the score to all the other thousands of startups that we've had through, and see whether in Web3 are they extra pessimistic or optimistic right now. And it can be a positive and a negative. So that's why I think as well it's the human side is important. For example, in early 23 when the interest rates were rising, and valuations came down for startups like Klarna and others, we saw a clear shift in the sentiment of the answers of the founders. They became very pessimistic, especially within fintech, whereas in clean tech it was fine. Web3 it was different, and so we actually used that as an opportunity to negotiate better terms when we invested in a fintech company, right? So that can be seen as a little bit aggressive, but I think it's just we're investors. We need to make money for our LPs, and so we knew that macro environment was going to get more positive over the next 10 years, and we use their pessimism to our advantage. So in that sense, I think it's a useful tool, and I think it comes back to that mindset of coming from an investment perspective.
Great. Eva, what do you think? If there's a massive jump between, for example, the next GPT model, would this sufficiently add value to your current tool stack?
Depends. It really depends. Well, I can. What I wanted actually to extend to what Sebastian said is it really is important to have all the tools that we have, and the data is indeed important. But I think what is even more important, and what we see in a everyday best practice, is saying us that the whole environment has become even more competitive. So even if we would all have access to the same data as what we heard today, what we face every day is what is our offering actually as a VC, especially when it comes to growth stage companies, right? I mean, so we literally need to compete in order to get into the best performing deals, companies, and so on. So on one hand, I mean, obviously at the very early stages, I think focusing on numbers, on data is important, and I mean, from our perspective, that's important too, and we really need to automate as much as possible. But on the other side, we are really facing challenges, also sometimes entering rounds. So what I personally also find very important is to build a relationship with founders, both founders and investors, early enough. And I think this part cannot be really automated. It's really what we as humans have to do. And it's really crucial, I think. I mean, as much as data is important, on the other hand, the human judgment and expertise and access to people and building relationships is of an essence here as well. So I don't know if I answered the question correctly.
Well said. Very, very important topic, Mustafa.
Maybe in addition to the same question, I think it means what happens a new model is introduced. Does it break your operations? No, because we integrated the LLM via API to our code base, to our machine, so to say. If they update their model, then we just change the model also, and it seamlessly continues. So hopefully they would, because we just figure out a couple of inefficiencies along the way. So it would just improve, I would say, if the GPT-5 is an improvement, of course.
Great. Guys, what about the last one? Is there anything specific you're using for competition analysis? Do you rely on databases? Do you scrape the web on yourself? What kind of data do you use for competition analysis, especially on the commercial side?
All right. So on our side, I guess that goes some way back to our own stack. So what we actually have found really helpful is let's say the LLM-based side of things, and I mean scraping websites, turning that into embeddings, using embeddings to search companies that are working on similar products, similar stuff. So that's really the most helpful. So I mean, of course, that doesn't go the whole way. So you're always kind of limited by the fact that the ways that companies talk about themselves are not exactly the ways that you'd like them to talk about themselves. So it might be quite marketing oriented. On some other cases, it might be quite generic and all that. So it's not like you can do everything based on that. The second thing is, of course, that requires scale. So I mean, if you in a sense like want to evaluate one company against its competitors, so you need to kind of know a lot of companies before you can pick the competitors out from that pool. So you need to kind of have pre-done or pre-evaluated a large enough pool of firms to be able to do that. The second thing is that I think that's also kind of interesting use case for the type of agentic AI. So let's say, I mean, you have a set of companies that seem to be competitors because, I mean, their embeddings look similar. They tend to be, they look like they talk about themselves in the same way. So you can actually do a further round or further rounds of, I mean, using LLMs in the process. So, okay, so let's take these two firms. So, I mean, why would they be competitors? Do they really look like competitors? What are the differences? Do they serve the same customers or the different customers? Do they have the same business model, the different business model, all that kind of questions? So you can actually use the Gen AI in, let's say, multiple iterations for these kind of questions. So of course, requires a lot of building yourself on that. But on the other hand, that's kind of where you can really get a lot of automation done and a lot of kind of value out of it.
Bastian, let me add something to this question. So I'm also curious to see, not only in the tool stack doing DD, is there also some sort of personal relation doing expert reference calls?
Yeah, actually, that was sort of my point as well. I think it's super important, and but what we found is that the way that companies describe themselves, again in the pre-seed and seed stage, sometimes the people building these products are not the best commercial people and don't know how to describe their product. And so you can use whatever tool you have available, but you might not find them on a website. They might not even know what LinkedIn is. Well, most do, luckily. But they don't know how to describe themselves. So I think having a network of startups that we've actually pre-screened through interactions with them is also very valuable. And that's why what we've done to sort of make sure that we're screening enough companies is we've built informal partnerships with over 100 universities, incubators, accelerators in a bunch of different countries in Europe, even the small ones, that have 4 or 5 startups through every year. They're very happy to speak with us because none of, I don't think Atomico probably are speaking with them, right? But we think about having the opportunity to find quality through quantity. And so that's one thing. The other thing is that we built one of the fastest growing angel networks in Europe. We have 1,250 angels, and the deal flow that they send us is very different than what we would find using these tools that we use anyway, and that we would find in an incubator. And so mapping that out and looking at these 600 to 800 startups we're looking at every month means that once we look at a startup, we can quickly do our own in-house analysis of, is there any other company out there doing the same thing? And we can filter in a very simple way to find out, the valuation, all these things, and then add that layer of tech to see if there's anything we've missed out there. But I think if you only do one thing, there's just a much higher likelihood of not seeing the whole picture and really getting it.
Great, so bottom line, boost your tool stack as far as possible, but definitely don't forget on the personal relationship. Guys, thanks a lot for the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, you guys. Thank you.